Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man, Frank Scalish. What's going on, Frank?
Everything and nothing.
Well, that is very descriptive. Recorded show today. It is icast week.
Yes.
And by now, all of the new Great Lakes Finesse stuff, people are clamoring for it. Clamoring to get their hands on the new Great Lakes Finesse and all of the other new products. So.
There we go. I was chasing my volume down, but I'm good now.
You got it. All right. So here's what I was kind of thinking, Frank, is every year stuff comes out at icast. I mean, we're right in the heart of icast right now. And every year there's just, I feel like there are some anglers, and correct me if I'm wrong, that are way more open to trying stuff on the water in a fishing related sense. And then there are some anglers who have like 5 things that they've used since 1987, and anything new, zero confidence, zero belief, and zero trust, and everything is a scam.
Yeah.
So I thought, what better way at icast, where we're coming out with all the new stuff and all these new things are coming out and new baits, than to talk this week about developing confidence in new baits, because I think people would be shocked if they knew how open you were to learning new things, to trying new things, to getting outside of your comfort zone. Because I'm not going to lie, Frank, sometimes you come across as to get off my lawn, I use 3 baits, stay out of here. I just need a Carolina rig and a
big crankbait
and a DD22, and anything else is just bull.
Right, 100%.
But you're not like that.
No, not even remotely close. You know, the funny thing is, I have a really close friend of mine, and he watches this show all the time, and he is a proponent of not changing. He won't change. Not hooks, not baits, nothing. Nothing. In all my years, I've tried so hard to get him to, let's just say, I don't want to say advance, because he's a great fisherman.
He just likes to take it out of the pack and tie it on.
He just has he is right here, and right here. And it never deviates. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so when I was going through my hook issues way back in the day, I tried to get him to use the hook that I discovered was the best for me. And he wouldn't on a bet change, and he still uses the same hooks that he used back, probably 20 years ago.
EWGs were around 20 years ago, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
What hook does he use?
He uses an offset worm hook.
Oh, just a straight round bend.
It's straight round bend worm hook.
Yeah.
In everything.
I think you'd be surprised at how many of the younger professional anglers on tour are reverting back to the round bend worm hook. I've talked to a couple of them that are like, "Boot, here's the secret. It's called a round bend." And I was like, "You don't say."
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so I'll be honest with you. So here's my problem with that hook. All right. The hook shanks are too long, and that's my problem with it. And that's the only problem I have, because to get the hook shank the length that I want it, I have to drop down to it too small of a diameter in the bend. And so that's why I use the hook that I use, that I caught so much flack from half of our...
From me, I know.
Well, yeah, from you, not half of our viewers. Because they wanted to know, and I sent them all the information on the hook so they could try them. Now, if it works for you, great. If it doesn't,
now, like offset worm hook that you're talking about this one right here, just a standard offset.
Yeah,
okay.
but it's not even the Cahill style. It's round bend.
Okay. Well, that's just a Gamakatsu offset. Oh, so there's one that has a deeper belly.
No,
and it's
like that one you just put up 100%.
No, this is a different. See that? That's
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
a deep. That's more of like a true horseshoe as opposed to that one that I just put up. Has
Right.
a little bit of a. Does it not look
Now,
different to you?
yeah, it is different. So like that style hook right there, I can get behind.
Okay, that's an offset worm hook, but that's got a little bit of a different
Yes,
vibe to it
right.
than
I can get behind that because
that.
that right, right.
But this is
Um,
what your buddy uses.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And there's nothing wrong with it.
No,
There's nothing
not
wrong
at
with
all.
it. It's just for my style and for what I
Mhm.
want out of my soft plastics. It
But
doesn't
you're also
work
not
well.
afraid to try them, to try
Oh
the
no,
new hooks, to try everything.
no.
That's what I'm saying. So you're saying you're trying to get him to expand his comfort zone.
Correct. So here, look, when everybody's been hemming and hawing about the straight shank uh, flipping hook for punching, and I went out and bought some of them. Yeah, exactly. I might even have
Okay.
one here if I could. I'm not even going to look for it. So I went out and bought them for punching, and I hated them. I absolutely hated them. The minute the point starts to come through the soft plastic, they snag on everything. They don't stay hooked up to the plastic after a fish because the hole splits. They're pain. Okay, so I went back to the Mustad Ultra Point Megabyte that that everyone laughs at me about, but I don't lose fish.
Yeah.
I just don't lose them. So why would I switch?
Yeah.
Okay, now that's being pig-headed, but it's not really because I did use the other stuff and I experimented with the other stuff to make sure that I wasn't missing something. Because
Mhm.
here's the deal with this. You guys are going to see a million things at icast this year coming
Mhm.
out. Everybody's got stuff and everybody's got a lot of stuff. Um and so you can't be closed-minded because you could be passing up something that fits the way you fish so well that if you get, tunnel vision, you will bypass that. So you have to always have an open mind when you're fishing because you may find something that in a certain application for you, you excel with that bait. So you can't overlook it. And I am like a knowledge seeking sponge.
Mhm.
Um, back, way back in the day, and I'm going way back in the day. Um, seriously, 2D sonar was it, and I wanted to learn how to Carolina rig fish. And back then, Carolina rig fishing was pretty simple. It was a little 4-inch do nothing worm on a Carolina rig.
Yep.
And I took that Carolina rig out. Now, obviously, if you're going to do an experiment with a technique or a bait, you have to do it when it's pertinent because for me to go out offshore fishing with the Carolina rig and during the spawn would have been a futile waste of effort. Okay.
Right. That's
So
kind of what we're talking about today is putting yourself in the best chance to
correct.
succeed when learning new techniques. So that's massively key is you don't want to learn a new
Correct.
technique when it's not
When it's
happening.
right, when it's not relevant because
Mhm.
you're already put yourself behind the 8 ball. So I went out with this thing and I Carolina rigged that do nothing worm and I caught a lot of little fish on it and I said this is BS. This rig's, a little fish like everybody else says, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's as Swindell put it in an article him and I were in Bassmasters. It's the quitter's rig. And so I said there's a better application. So I started getting 6-inch lizards and 8-inch lizards and 10-inch worms. And I started Carolina rigging that stuff
Mhm.
and absolutely changed the game. It literally changed the game for me. And so that became one of my number one go-to baits once the fish left the bank even when they were coming to the bank, because pre-spawn could be an outstanding Carolina rig time, depending on what lakes you're on and what the make is. So I developed this, okay. Then because back then we had monofilament, we didn't even have fluorocarbon. So back then, you know, your rod choices, you had to get the longest, stiffest rods you could find because there was so much stretch in mono. If you bomb a cast, which everybody does with the C rig, they bomb a cast 1.5 miles. You literally are picking up 5 feet of line stretch to try and set the hook on the fish, and your success in landing was very poor. It was probably 60% of everything you came in contact with. Well, then braid came out first. Braid comes out, and I go, oh, bell goes off. Braid, no stretch, better hook percentage. So I spooled my Carolina rig rod up with 50-pound braid. And I went out there, and I was on Santee Cooper, and I'll never forget this. I believe it might have been a Bassmaster event or a Jerry Ryan tournament. I can't remember, probably Jerry Ryan back then. So anyway, so I'm on Santee Cooper, and I got the braid on, and I did everything right except for one thing. I didn't realize that with braid, if you move your rod 6 feet, you're moving the
Bait
lure
moves 6 feet.
Okay. So
Oh, that's a great point.
So what was happening on my hook sets, I broke the first 5 or 6 fish off on the hook set, and I was using 17-pound 17-pound mono leader. So I was breaking them off at the hook set. So I go, my rod choice, the rod's too heavy, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, you got to sit down in the boat and figure this out. So what I wound up doing was I backed my drag off enough so when I really set the hook, my line would slip out. And that prevented the break-offs, but it didn't prevent me from getting a good hook in the fish. And so then I started, my hook percentage went up almost to 90% just with that little drag thing. Then when I got home from the event on some of the local lakes here, I said, I have to tweak this system out because there's a weak link. I don't want the drag to have to slip like that, because when I would fight the fish in, especially down there, you're catching 5-pounders.
Torque.
You need the torque to get them in. So, I went to a Powell 765, which was softer than the 766 by a lot. And then that was it. Everything after that was 100%. I very rarely ever don't land one. It happens sometimes because they don't bite it right, or you do something funky and you don't set the hook like flipping. You pull it sideways and you keep pulling it, keep it moving, and you got them because of the braid.
But you were with the braid though, you were, hey, I'm gonna go figure this stuff out. Like you weren't like, 100%. Oh, I'm good with my mono, I'm not gonna.
No way.
That's kind of the thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. Like I'm sure that there's this will go both ways, right? So I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are listening to this show that still do everything with monofilament. With monofilament. I think there's a lot of people that listen. I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 people that I know that are like, screw that stuff. I tried fluoro once. I broke off on the hook set, and they used 20 to 25-pound mono. Now, they tried it like 15 years ago, like twice, and broke off, and then in their mind, it's done. So like, how do you get, so like, and I was more thinking baits, but this is great, like in terminal tackle and line as well, Frank.
Well,
how do you get confidence in that new stuff to where like, is it cool? Like they can just, and we're talking just fun fishing here or club tournaments or whatever, not making a living fishing. What 99.9999% of people, including me and you, when we hit the water. But how do you, like, would you say just stick with the mono, or how would you have someone get confidence in something that will actually help them and increase their hook to land or their fish catching or their bite ratio, who's really just die hard in one thing that they've done for 20 years?
Dude, that's a great thought track right there. Because here, listen to this, okay? As an angler, all you have to do is Remember how many times you go to tell a fishing story and go, and I lost him, and he came off, and this. Okay, so if you're one of those guys that loses 30% of the bass you hook or 20% of the bass you hook, there's a problem in your system. Okay. So you have to start analyzing it. And so what I've done most of my entire life is you start out with the first variable that you could start out with. Is my hook sharp enough? Okay. That's the easiest, simplest variable right there. Is my hook sharp enough? Then I go, okay, my hook's like a needle. What's the problem? So then you got to go, is the rod I'm using the right rod for this technique? Whatever the technique is this the right rod for it? Okay. And then, and more often than not, you're going to find your rod choice is off by a power or two or 6 inches or, a foot. You know what I mean? There's fishing rods are like golf clubs. Each one has a specific purpose.
We
And
got to
then,
do a show on this, Frank.
yeah, we will.
Write that down as a full show, determining if you're using the right rod. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just know,
no.
like, when we have a good idea for a show, and that one, like, because you said you have to make sure you're using the right rod, and I'm sitting over here, wow, the hell do I know what the right rod is?
Right, exactly. And so this is what I'm writing show
Okay.
idea. So
Yeah,
this
so
is
just keep that and then continue on your train of thought, because we could get stuck on that for the remainder of the show.
right, exactly.
But
Okay,
that's one
so
of the elements. So
that's
determining right
one
rod.
of the elements. So if you discover that your rod choice is appropriate and you're still losing fish, it comes down to one thing and one thing only. Well, two things. The line you're using has way too much stretch, or you're not setting the hook properly for the technique you're using. Because I've seen guys Carolina rig that when they get a bite, they slack the line, reel up, and they over their head try to crack the fish. And you know what's happening when they do that? All they're doing is that egg sinker is just coming off the bottom and going back down. You have to reel into the fish and you have to pull while you're reeling to tighten up on them. It's not a wham. You're just reel in and pull, and it tightens up on them, and you got them. So you analyze all this stuff. Here, I'll tell you a perfect example. The statement that you made earlier, how do you know, or are you afraid to do this? When do you do it? I'm on Okeechobee in a Bassmaster event. I'm sponsored by Pradco, and I use silver thread monofilament most of my life. All right. I get a phone call. Hey, we got this new fluorocarbon. We want you to try it out. Blah, blah, blah. Where are you at? I'm on Okeechobee. I'm at Okeechobee. Okay. What do you need? I said, send me 17 and 20 and 12. 12 for my cranking, 17 and 20 for flipping and pitching. So I literally, the last day of practice, I literally spooled up my rods with the fluorocarbon. The very last day of practice. I went out to a new spot and I wanted to hook a couple. So I didn't go where I was going to fish in the tournament. I went to a different area. I got bites, I smashed them fish, and I was absolutely impressed with the sensitivity it had. I was blown away by the lack of stretch because if you compare fluorocarbon to monofilament, the lack of stretch decreases monumentally, just like if you compare braid to mono or fluoro, there's zero stretch. Okay. So I was super impressed. I fished the whole tournament with that new fluorocarbon, and I fished it one day.
Really? Just because
because I liked the way it felt. I liked how I could feel the bites. I liked how I could feel if I'm in, crispy grass, or if I'm in soft, mushy grass, or if I'm on rocks, I could feel everything. So I immediately switched. It wasn't even a long thought out process for that. It just happened. All right.
Was that silver thread stuff? It was kind of like the original stuff was kind of like gray.
Well, that's silver thread original monofilament.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, it
The
was
new
that.
stuff was the white fluorocarbon.
Yeah, it's clear,
Yeah,
clear fluoro.
clear.
And
Uh,
and and in my opinion, it was money. So I
so you
never
tested it.
switched.
So this is
Yeah.
great. We still haven't even gotten to baits or 20 minutes in, but I love this because the first time that I went up to Thousand Islands and the Lake Ontario area, I spent 9 days by myself in a 300 square foot cabin, daylight to dark, on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River. And one of the things that I did was as a spinning rod guy, but these fish are different. And I
Oh yeah.
wanted to see and I wanted to learn what I could do with these fish on 6, 8, 10, 12 pound test line
Mhm.
on a 7 foot medium, 7 foot medium heavy, 7.4 medium, 7.4 medium heavy, or a 7.6 medium. And I went out with no pressure on the line and I hooked as many fish as I could. And I tested the limits of what I could do. And we'll start with 6 pound test, right? So if you're a
Mhm.
guy who's not a big spinning rod guy, and you can literally take any lure that 6 pound test is tied to and just go like this and break it, even if it is the highest quality line on
Yeah.
earth, right?
That's a
Like
fact.
you can literally just tie 6 on. And so there's two things that I learned here was, if you slack line and do like that, boom, it breaks. But if you slowly pull, and you could still break it. But I did not have confidence in those big smallies in current with that light line. And after I had forced myself in that uncomfortable situation, you learn what you can do with all this new
Yeah,
stuff. And you're like, man, with the medium 7 foot, you can put a lot more heat on these fish with 6 pound test
you would
you
think.
than you would think. Because if I wasn't, I was jumping them off. So I was gaining confidence and becoming comfortable with stuff that I was uncomfortable with. Vice versa, then I kept going up and up and up and was catching them on 12 pound tests. And it was just interesting, but it was what you said, to where you went out and you put yourself in a position to succeed, and then you tested the limits of it. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm not comfortable with that, you put yourself in that uncomfortable position and you go out there knowing, hey, today is a testing day. I'm going to get a lot of bites and I'm going to figure out what works for me.
Right, 100%, and you did it the right way too, because you were on enough fish where you could get the gauge. All
Mm-hmm.
right, you were on enough fish where you could pick up the other rod, do the same thing. Because like if you
Yep.
put 6 pound test line on 3 different sticks,
Yeah.
right, you could immediately drop the one rod, pick the other one up, and do it right
Yep.
simultaneously, right side by
So
side.
the other thing that I learned, and so I think this was 2021, I want to say, and we went there in 21 and 23, or maybe 22 and 23. So before that, every big largemouth, and I've always been a spinning rod guy, you know that, Frank,
Mhm.
a spinning reel guy too. But before that, every time I hooked one, I was a back reeler.
Oh, I
It didn't
back
matter
reel
what
as
the reel was,
yeah, I back reel as a
because
madman.
I resistance to change. And I had, this was when the spinning reels were popping off. Everyone started throwing them. And I had guys that were like, dude, that's so archaic. Like, what do you live in the Middle Ages? You go home and
Yeah.
eat like a leg of lamb and
Yeah,
a freaking jug of ale.
right,
You,
womanize
you,
first.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I catch fish. And I was like, well, what do you mean? No, I back reel. It's an art. And they're like, you realize you're paying for the drag in the spinning reel. And when it's right, like, and I
yeah.
just had no confidence in a big fish going
Oh, yeah, me
and
either.
having control. I mean, dude, I was like, nope, I want to be able to back reel it and keep it. So I had that thing locked down. And I'd get the hook in and then click, and then I was
right.
well, that was an issue in the opens because you got to land your own dang fish. So
Oh,
then what
yeah,
you'd have to do is click it back over to
and
not
then
back, and then do anyway. I let those smallies just peel drag out in Lake Ontario. And after about 30 of them, where I didn't break a single one off, I got confidence in the drag system and letting it work the way that it should. And now I have not back reeled, well, since that time, which is what, 4 years, 4 years ago. And
Yeah,
it was all because I took something that I had massive resistance to. I was like, this is how I'm always going to do it.
yeah.
Put myself in a position where I was uncomfortable, figured it out, and went, my God, the drag does what it's supposed to.
Yeah, well, especially today. I mean, today the spinning reel drags are
And you
pretty.
still back reel, Frank?
Oh yeah, but here's what I do. Um, I set my drag appropriately so the fish could take line out, and then I back reel. And if I get in trouble, because with the spinning reels, the little button's right by the reel, so you could just click it with your finger and put it back and engage it. So when I'm fighting the fish forward, I won't back reel. When I'm fighting the fish forward, it's in drag mode. Okay. When the fish starts to take off, I'll click it over and I'll back reel them a little bit, but I can stop reeling and then let the drag do the rest. When I
Yeah.
get him close to the boat, all I do is click the little button over when he's close to the boat so I could do the one-hand man grab. You know what I mean?
So what would it take for you to get comfortable with not ever hitting the back reel again? Or are you a back reeler for life?
Yeah,
Because
I'm
it's
kind
way
of.
more. Is that a thing where it's efficiency, or is that a thing? I'm gonna sneeze here real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's a comfort factor because you
Okay.
have so much control over it. It's a comfort factor. I have way more control over the fish. Now, I will tell you this: sometimes you catch a brute and you go to back reel if it's drizzling out or something, and that handle slips out of your hand.
Now you're
Oh,
screwed.
it's going brrr. So what I learned how to do is take my finger on the side of the spool and use
Yep.
my finger to slow that drag down so I can grab it again and fight the fish. Um, I don't I do not distrust the drag systems. If you have them set properly,
Mhm.
they work. And a lot of times you have the right amount of pressure to keep that hook in the fish.
So one of the things that I think is done a lot, and like in golf, right? Like how many times, if you're a golfer, your buddy gets a new driver or something, and you're like, hey, let me take a couple hacks with that thing. Like you're trying it out, testing it out, and it can be like expensive in fishing, to where if you want to try all this stuff, you got to buy it, and then there's not like a buy and try, but
A buy and
that
try. That's how
that would
marriages should be.
good Lord, Frank. Oh, you're gonna be watching this episode alone.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
She's a keeper. I got her. I've been with her for 27 or 8 years now.
But don't be afraid. Like if you've got a buddy who has a medium action rod, or who has a lot of it, to be like, hey, can I spool? Let me. I'll hook me up with a spool of this, or let me try this rod
Yeah.
for a day, or something like that. That way you can get without going out and having to spend money on something that you're not comfortable with yet.
Yeah, and here's the cool thing about, rods and reels are easy because you guys fish with other guys.
Mhm.
So you could say, "Hey, dude, let me make a few casts with that. Let
Yeah,
me catch a
big
fish
time with the
with
braid
that."
to fluoro too. There's a lot of guys that still are resistant of the braided line to the fluorocarbon leader.
I was one of those guys for a while, for a long
So
time.
how did you get comfortable in that? Because that's a massive change, Frank.
It was huge, but here's what happened, okay? The first time the braid came out, I was on Erie smallmouth fishing, and I spooled a spinning reel up with braid, put a leader on it, fluorocarbon leader. I went out there and I was losing smallmouth after smallmouth, where I never lost smallmouth like that. I mean, you lose a few smallmouth because it's just the nature of the animal, but
Mhm.
I never lost fish like that drop shotting on Erie, never. I said, I'll never use the braid. It's tearing big holes in the fish's mouth and they're jumping off and bullshit on this.
Yeah, this is crap. I
Yeah,
can
so
see you
right,
spooling it
right.
off, going, never
Oh,
again.
never
Back
again.
to the mono.
So here's what happened, right? We're going back to analyzing, right?
Yep.
Remember I said you got to start from someplace and get to the end. So I start with the hook. The hook's not a problem. I've been using the same hook. It's always good for me, not a problem, right? I did the line change, so immediately in my head, it's the freaking line. I'm not using the line anymore. I made a quick judgment, pulled the spool off, put my spool of fluoro back on, because with my spinning rods, I've got 3 extra spools for each reel. Pulled the spool off, put the fluorocarbon on, went on my merry way fishing that day, and my hook to land ratio went sky high without using the braid. So I said, screw this. I'm never using that crap. I'm not doing this. Then I looked at my equipment and I went, the rod I'm using is way too stiff for what I'm doing.
You're probably using a medium action or a
I
medium
was
heavy.
using a medium heavy because
Yeah, no,
with the fluorocarbon, all right, and you're
it
fishing
stretches.
sometimes 30 to 40 feet deep. I needed a stiff rod to get the hook in the fish. Well, I went to a 764 Powell. Well, actually back then it was the 744 Powell, which was softer than what I was using.
So the 744 means 7 foot 4 inch and a 4 power.
Correct, which is about a medium
Yeah,
heavy.
and a 5 power, 6 power. So that's how it
Right.
gets a heavier
Right.
rod. So when you're talking about that last number, 4, 5, or 6, goes from like
It's
medium heavy, medium light, all the way down.
right. And you got to remember there, as the powers increase,
Yeah.
the stiffness of the blank increases as well.
So you actually, so the braid was not getting a fair shake, but it
No,
had nothing to do with the performance of the line. It had to do with how and what you were using it on.
right. And once I switched, every spinning rod I got is braid to fluoro. And here, back in the day, you call yourself a spinning rod fisherman. Back in the day, that's what everybody saw me doing. Is nothing. I had probably 10 spinning rods in my boat, maybe more. And
I
I
knew I
fished.
liked you for a reason.
I fished a lot with them, but now I have. Well, shit, I have 8.
I mean, am I wrong in this in saying that fishermen are one of the worst I will call it a habit, just across the board, not picking on any one individual, because I think we're all guilty of it. Is
No,
you try something one time, you go, screw this, and then it goes into the never going to use it category.
1,000%.
And it
1,000%.
could be anything from equipment to baits to whatever. And then you either miss out on a lot of things that you could. I did that with the Biffle Bug. I was 3
me
years
too.
behind on the
Dude,
Biffle Bug, and
same
literally
bait.
it took co-anglers in the open waxing me on that thing.
Yeah.
And all my buddies going, well, yeah, I was just bugging, for me to go,
Exactly.
okay, I got to figure this freaking stupid thing out. Because, I mean, I was covering it. I was watching Biffle catch him. It's in Oklahoma. It's the lakes that I'm fishing at the time when I'm fishing them. And I'm
you
getting
never picked it
waxed
up.
on them. And I had fished it a couple times, and I think I'd lost a couple packs. I'd broken fish off. I'd lost fish. I hadn't gotten bit. I was like, well, I'll just throw a square bill up there. Why would I? And I just had an aversion to it, but I hadn't given it a fair shake.
I think that is so funny, because that was my biggest. I would not pick that thing up.
Oh, we've had talks about that, haven't we?
Yeah, I would not pick it up. I'm like, no way. That it's nowhere near better than a football.
I'm like, it's
jig.
just reeling in a damn jig or reeling in a Texas rig. Like okay, I'll just reel in my jig.
Right. That's what I said. It's no better than a football jig. I'll just use a football jig. You know what I mean? And I had the biggest aversion to that. And it's probably, of all the lures out there, or is that considered a lure or a technique?
That's a lure to me.
Okay. So of all the lures out there,
it might be a technique. It doesn't matter. It's indifferent, because techniques or lures, same thing.
Right. Either way, that is still something that I have to make myself tie on. I will not. It's not a go-to for me. And that's to my detriment, because I have buddies of mine that go, dude, you got to drag that thing around, man. You won't believe your eyes. You won't believe, you know what I mean? And so I'm just like, but it's still one of those things. That's so funny you mentioned that bait.
So I went out on Grand one day. I remember I was in Duck Creek on the pea gravel and started catching them. And but it was the same thing that you had. So it's a cast and wind bait.
Right.
So to me, putting it on 20, 22, even 25, sometimes I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm gonna like cast that heavy line. Well, you'd get him a dunk and it would swim off and you just freaking swing and break him off all the time, because I was throwing it on 16 and 18 because I
Yeah.
was like, oh, you got a cat. Well, I mean, you're literally grinding it in the rocks. So like one of the things that got confidence was I started throwing it on 22 sunline.
Yeah.
And then,
Which, but
talking to
and
what's that?
that 22 sunline has the diameter of about 17 or 18.
Of most other brands,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to start looking at the diameter. So, but I mean, that's some big line.
Yeah.
And
Oh
then I
yeah.
started going with I started looking at what Biffle at the time was throwing, and I mean, he's throwing a freaking broomstick on it,
Oh yeah.
and he's cracking them, and he's and then so I got comfortable trying to throw a bait with a heavy action rod, and when it gets stuck, not going like this and just keep reeling it so it would pop out.
Right.
And then I had to, most of the time I was always, every time you'd hook one, they'd come up and throw it. Well, I mean, you start watching the guys who do it: broomstick, heavy line, shallow, and then just wench those suckers in regardless. So there is no fighting. I mean, vintage stuff. So you put all those things together, and now I've got a lot of confidence. I mean, it's in my boat every single tournament.
Yeah. I have my little Biffle box in my boat.
But you still don't have the ultimate confidence in it.
No, I don't. It's not that. No, I don't. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I don't.
Yep. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I just don't. I've had very limited success doing it, and I don't know if it's the bodies of water I'm fishing, or I'm not keying in at the perfect, most opportune moment for it. And that's the deal. Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, I have tons of them.
But that's a case of a lure that is effective, and there might be a little bit of hard-headedness in your case, to where you might be leaving some fish on the table just because of your preconceived notion as to what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. I guess that's our transition into learning new baits. Correct. But we had an hour-long talk about it off air.
Oh,
and to your credit, you were like, okay, what in your opinion, and I'm not saying I'm an expert at this by any means, but I have confidence in this past in the open before this one on St. Clair that we just fished at Eufaula. I had the utmost confidence in throwing a Biffle Bug up on the shallow rock points 3 or 4 times on every spot that I pulled up on.
Yeah,
and caught fish on it. But it was one of the first things that I did on all this shallow rock. But what I was saying in your deal, you sat there and peppered me with questions.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because you have to learn. So I'm going to say, as a newbie to that technique and lure, right? Yep. You have to know everything you can possibly know about it to set up as close to perfect as you can right off the get-go. And if you have somebody like you, when we talked about it, and I remember the conversations, we even went through colors, some of your favorite colors, and then I went out and bought them all, because I'm like, okay, this works. He's got it figured out. I need to figure it out. Now I got to start trying it, and and so that's kind of what I did. I have a spot that I found last year that would lend itself undeniably perfect for this. And I haven't done it on it yet.
We have. So then vice versa, I'm a wigglewort guy, and I did not have a lot of confidence in that kind of square, like the speed end that you developed.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a conversation going into 2 years ago, I think. And it had just come out and you said, I'm sending you some of these things, the speed end. And I remember we had a conversation, and I set up a rod and reel with the same line, the same inches, per
Real
turn
turn, yeah.
in the real turn, and areas where I fished him. And our first tournament was on Cherokee. And now the bite changed in the tournament, but I vividly remember going out in practice with that bait and that setup and catching fish and getting confidence and burning that crankbait and working that crankbait where I would not have worked it based on the way you said it was designed to be worked. And I caught the crap out of both smallmouth and largemouth.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Oh
that was
yeah.
something that I would not have done. And now it's a staple in the arsenal.
Right, because because you had the wherewithal to want to experiment, and you got knowledge on it enough to go out there and have some success for it, and then the more you do it, the more
It
success
was
you
that
have.
color right there too.
Oh yeah. Is that ghost pepper? Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
ghost
I
pepper.
think it is. Yeah, it was that
Yeah,
color, and then you also sent me that color.
right on. That craw color there is for later on in the spring.
Yep.
The reds are for early spring.
Yeah. Anyway, but I'm just saying it kind of goes both ways
Mm-hmm.
on the learning new stuff. Biffle Bug's a
Okay.
a great example for you. Like what else you
Oh
got on
no,
the
I
list?
got a way better example
Okay.
because I'm employing it now.
Okay.
Live scope. Okay.
Okay.
So when you took me out scoping crappies, all right. First time I'd ever Frankie, I saw Frankie's first, but I never really
He
fished it.
doesn't let you up on the front deck. He says, "Stay
No,
in the back,
he's
Dad.
got he's got that, and then he's got he's tough, man.
Stay in
He's
the
just
back and drag your tube, old man."
Yes, right. Put that rig down there, light up a dart, and drag that thing.
That's why
So
I got you the full sit down seat, not so you could stand up here next to me.
that's right. He got me the Bill Dance swivel seat.
Yeah.
The
Drink your
angled
natural
seat.
ice and drag your Carolina rig.
Exactly. So so we when we scoped the crappie, right? Then Frankie gave me his old unit because he got a Gen 2. He gave me his Gen 1, and I started fishing off the Gen 1, but the only thing I really did with it was crappie fished with it and used it to see my structure when I was bass fishing. Like, there's my rock pile, there's the break, there's the stump. And then I practiced and practiced and practiced casting to the object that I could see on the live scope. Cast to that object. Did I hit it? Did I not hit it? How far away was I? You know what I mean? Because one of the adjustments for scoping is judging distance in front of you on your cast. Most of the time, we have most of what I found, maybe not everybody, but with me, I overcast all the time. I see it out there. Oh, that's 50 feet. And then I can't see my bait. I'm reeling and reeling. I can't see my bait. And then all of a sudden my bait shows up. I'm like, holy crap, I must have casted 100 feet. You know what I mean? So I practice and practice with that. So then the long and short of it is I crappie fished off of my unit for a year before I ever said I am bass fishing off this unit now. I am
Whenever I
bass
was
fishing off of it.
whenever I was there with you, you were not sold on it. I mean, not sold, but you were using it
Like a
very,
locator.
yeah, like a 2D locator.
Right. And
Which
that's
there's nothing wrong with it, but I mean, it was a comfort level thing for you.
correct. So now here's how I apply my unit. Okay. So now I got a hold of the bass tank. I got a Garmin up front. Not that one locator is better than another locator. I just fished off of Matt, your Garmin, and I liked the screen, the way it looked. It was clear, it was concise, you could see everything really good. So I said, okay, I'm gonna just get a Garmin and use it only for scoping purposes. So I don't have to hook it up with all my Lowrance units. I can just keep it separate. It's not going to hold a waypoint. It's not going to do anything for me but look ahead of the boat. So I got a hold of the bass tank. I got unit, the wiring harness, all this good stuff, because I wanted it done right. Frankie had so much knowledge of it already. He installed everything. I was with him. We both installed everything because I wanted to make sure that I knew how it was installed. So if something happens, I could troubleshoot. So again, part of the learning curve. So now, okay, now I'm bass fishing with it, throwing minnow baits on it. You know, I scan out there, I see the structure, I see the fish, and if I throw my minnow rig out there, I've learned. Okay, Frankie and I were actually fishing on a lake that neither one of us has ever been to before. And on my minnow rig, I was throwing a paddle tail, small paddle tail, and I cast it out there and I'm reeling it through, and the fish looks at it and then does that, looks at it and does that. And I'm like, man. So I got a forward facing Sonar minnow, the 4-inch size, and I put it on another one. And that's basically a straight tail. It's got a little tail on it, but it's, for the most part, it's a straight tail, no paddle action. I threw that out there and it freaking swallowed it. And so then I go, oh man alive. Now I got to have straight tails and paddle tails. And so this game that we're playing now, there's a lot of things that are coming into play because now I'm catching them, seeing them, and throwing jerk baits on them. And how is the jerk bait? When do you throw the jerk bait? When do you throw the minnow rig? When? And so now, so this is all piling in here, and I'm in the process of, you know, figuring all this out, which is exciting because it's new for me. So it's exciting and it's fun. And the other thing I found out, which is just blows me away, is when do you shake the damn thing and when do you just slowly reel it in? I caught so many shaking it, you know, you're going like, you know, I caught so many shaking it, and then all of a sudden they won't touch it shaking it. And then you just got to slowly reel it. And then how fast do they want it? And if they want it faster, you got to go to a heavier head so it doesn't fly too high in the water column. So there's all these variables that are coming into play now. And so I've got boxes and boxes of this crap that I'm putting together as I learn something new and hone in on it. So now I've got boxes of, you know, minnow heads, different sizes, and minnows and different lengths of minnows, paddle tails. You know, it's mind blowing, man.
I mean, is fishing not weird, Frank? You got a whole group of guys who literally will try every single thing that comes out. And then you've got a whole group of guys
that won't budge,
that will refuse to change anything over 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's just a small group in the middle that are normal, rational people. The other 98% are either on one end of the spectrum or the other.
Right. Exactly. It's, I can't even say what I was just going to say because but it's a perfect analogy. But yeah. You've got one group way over here, you've got one group way over here, and then you've got the main core, you know what I mean?
But I feel like the anglers in my personal life, the anglers who catch the most fish, who are always on them, are tinkerers. They're tinkerers who have a core skill set and what they enjoy doing. But every once in a while, when you get in the boat with them, you go, "What's that?
What's that?"
You look down and you go, "What's that?" And they go, "Don't worry about that."
Oh,
you
yeah,
go, no,
100%.
Seriously, what is that? And they're like, working on something here.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
You eventually will get it out of them, and you're like, "Well, how did you figure that out?" And they're like, you know, blah blah blah, and this and this. So they're guys who have developed their core skill set, what they have confidence in, but they're never satisfied with just what they've got. They're always looking to add a little bit. They're always looking to explore a little bit. They're looking to get out of their comfort zone, not with everything, not to revamp their entire style, but to just add another little element to it. I think that's what your show does, like what we do on day 4 does really well.
Yeah, it's just to put another, it's just to give you another advantage. Like I design out of necessity, not because I sit down and go, hey, today I'm going to create something. You know, like when you took me crappie fishing, a big bell went off to me because I love crappie fishing. It's so much fun. But the bell went off in my head because I said, oh my gosh, I got an idea. I can apply something to bass fishing. It's going to be crazy. Now I've got scoping lures coming out in War Eagle and Bobby Garland.
Whoa, were you allowed to say that?
Probably not. I probably just effed up, but I do. And yeah, I probably screwed up. But I do because it's like you said, Matt, you know, you see something and I'm like, I could make this better. Or I have another viable avenue when the bite gets finicky, or you know, whatever the case may be. um that you know, inventiveness comes out of necessity. I like my FX colors that came out of a necessity, because when I fly fish all the time, in fly fishing you learn, oh, you got to match the hatch. Okay, well, you match the hatch, but what happens when they're not that's not
Hatching what you're
standing out.
matching.
Yeah, exactly. It's not standing out. So when I was steelhead fishing one time, I made this thing. It was the most ungodly thing. It was just a giant flash pattern. It had some fur on it and mega amounts of flash to it. And turned out one day we peeled them on it. Like, it was ludicrous how many steelhead we caught. And because what was happening is everybody's in the rivers, they're throwing the same old. They're sick and tired of seeing olive woolly buggers bouncing across the rocks in front of them.
Right.
And you know, what I did was I said, these fish live in the lake all year. They chase alewives, ciscos, and emerald shiners. I'm gonna make a alewife pattern and flash the shit out of it. They can't help themselves. You know what I mean? They can't, because they feed on it always. So they can't help themselves. And sure enough, they blistered it. And
That's awesome.
yeah, so that's kind of how it happens. You know what I mean? And back then we were guiding for them, so my clients had to catch them. You know, I had guys coming in from England, for crying out loud. You know, the UK to steelhead fish here. They're not coming all this way to see them swim by their feet. You know what I mean? You got to get them hooked up. So
those are just musky fishermen.
Yeah. I know.
Break out the cold ones. We saw one.
We raised one.
Oh, it was awesome. Jim started figure eighting, and then we caught a glimpse of her. And at that point, we knew we could tie it back up at the dock. We had done what we came to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. That's
I'm just kidding. It's fine. I love musky fishermen.
It's perfect. That's so true.
Yeah.
So we got 2 follows in a take. But yeah, so you know what I mean. That's how it is. But yeah, I mean, the same thing, dude. You remember the crankbait episode I did where I talked about how the baits dive? I covered the straight XP, the Normans, the fat free shads, et cetera, et cetera. That was all by fishing them. Yeah, I learned that by fishing with them. And the coolest thing was I was out cranking the other day, and I could watch it on my live scope. Like when I cast it out, I can see it going down, or I could see it going down. I can see it bouncing on the bottom. Like, it'll hit the bottom and you lose it for a second, and then when you hit something and it deflects, you could see it deflect off of it. I'm like, you don't understand. I mean, I I love this crap. I love it so much. It's unbelievable.
But I think this was a good topic. I mean, we covered a variety of things from baits to line to rod and reels to techniques. I know in the comments people are going to be like, oh, Matt, you need to take your own advice with the Carolina rig. I will also say there are some techniques that maybe you just don't enjoy throwing. You don't care if it catches fish or not. You're just not going to freaking throw it. And that's that. And that's the Carolina rig for me. I understand that it's effective. I understand that it catches fish. I understand that you have the setup. You know, I'm just not a guy who's going to throw the same thing that you do when you put a piece of chicken liver on and you want to catch a 2-pound channel cat.
Yeah,
so,
I'm tracking what you're saying.
And sometimes it isn't. If you don't enjoy it, if you've tried it and it's not your jam, then you don't have to do it. There are guys who will throw a big swim bait all day for 2 bites.
Yeah,
there are also guys who did it and threw it and went, you know what? I don't really enjoy this. It's not my jam. And we're here to have a good time and to catch fish. And it's also a free country. If you're in the United States and in Canada, you do what you want. If you don't want to throw it, don't throw it. We're not saying you're a bad fisherman if you're not expanding your horizons, but there is also something cool about having that moment where the light bulb goes off and you go, my goodness, I've got another arrow in the quiver.
Oh yeah, 100%. Absolutely. So, that's the beauty part about fishing. Listen, the coolest thing of fishing is it's as enjoyable to a guy sitting on a lounge chair waiting for his bobber to go under as it is for the ardent pro. The enjoyment level is exactly the same. The thrill of catching the fish is the same, whether you're overweight, whether you're the healthiest person in the world, whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 80 years old. The enjoyment is the same, and how you approach it, it's up to you as an individual. It's up to you. But the coolest thing about fishing is if you love it, you just love it.
Well, there's a lot of people who love Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish.
I hear the music.
Big shout out to our listeners.
That's true.
Interested. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments here. Like I said, we are deep in icast week right now. I'd love to hear what you guys think about some of the stuff you have or haven't seen. Anything you're excited to try. Yeah. What do you think the biggest thing? I think it's gonna have to be a jig head and a minnow deal, Frank. I think there's gonna be a lot of jig heads, a lot of minnows out there. We've seen what Great Lakes Finesse has come out with, kind of refining some of the things that they're already at the top of the game with.
Right. I mean,
with
it's
a couple
always
new subtle offerings. I think that this will be the year of subtlety and basic and subtle.
Yeah, it is. It's going to get to that point just because the fish are seeing different kinds of pressure now that they hadn't seen before. And pressured fish, let's be honest, changes everything.
Write that down. Have we done a pressured fish episode?
No,
like
I'm
on
writing
a lake
it down.
that just gets absolutely pounded 365 days a year. How do you still go out and catch them? We got a rod for the job and a pressured fish one.
All right, dude, we're getting content.
Content, Frank. All right. We'll talk to everybody next week. See ya.